All right, welcome in, folks, to another great episode of I've Got a Theory. I'm your host, Henish. I'm here with my good friend, Carmen Ronan. Carmen, welcome on.
Hi.
And so, Carmen, you're chatting to us from Arizona.
Yeah, from Phoenix, sunny Phoenix, Arizona. It's probably in the 70s today, nice and warm. It's colder in the house than it is outside, I think.
It hasn't warmed up inside the buildings yet because it's a little
Yeah.
bit chilly in southern San Diego, too, and in sunny San Diego as well, because, yeah, it's like down to 40s, which is absurdly cold for us. I had to put out the flannels to stay
Yeah.
warm, even in my
Looking
office.
looking sharp though.
It's my construction worker look today. I feel like I should have a piece of 2x4 on my shoulder here. Well, speaking of manly endeavors, sponsored by Manscaped here at I've Got a Theory. So I want a quick shout out to them for hooking me up with the swag and helping our gentlemen stay groomed. I mean, you said you don't know how much you contribute, but we do it for the ladies, or for your partner. Depending, regardless of gender. But maybe you do it for yourself too, right? A lot of female grooming, they say they do it for themselves and stuff like that. But it helps with your overall confidence and your swagger, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say is, any form of there's lots of different forms of self-care inside and outside, but I think taking care of yourself and taking pride in how you present yourself to the world is important. And whether it's in public or wherever, you know that you're taking care of yourself, and
Yeah, because this is
brings you some swagger, like you said.
ideally you're not showing off your grooming skills in public because that could get you arrested. But but everywhere else, it's probably encouraged. So thanks to Manscaped. Check them out. If you use the code I've Got a Theory, you can get discounts and free stuff and things like that. So with that out of the way, Carmen, let's get to your theory. Talk to me. What do you got going on? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this for years, ever since I lived in Chile. After I went to ASU, Arizona State University, and afterwards I did kind of a gap year type thing, volunteering with at-risk youth in Chile, Santiago, Chile, and Henish, you and I met in grad school, and we met a lot of people with international experiences there. So my thing that I've been thinking about is that we have so many kind of problems, global problems, that cross borders, and we need new ways of solving them, and that we need new types of leaders, future-ready global leaders who can deal with some of these intractable issues that no one country can solve, and that having more people, professionals like you and I, live abroad, have the experience of being outside their comfort zone abroad, will help us develop those leadership skills that we need.
Yes, that never seems to be a criteria, right? It never seems to be a criteria when we're picking people. Like, where have you been? Who have you interacted with? What are your different perspectives? And do you understand them, right? And so that's kind of what you're getting to is like, if you've only lived one way and you lived in your cave in wherever you're from, and your you're a hometown hero maybe to all of your constituents, but that doesn't necessarily make you relevant on the national or even at the state level if you can't interact with people from everywhere in the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this really hit home for me, because I was on a webinar. COVID-19, one of the things that happens is we're all on webinars more. But I was listening to a presentation by the dean of the Thunderbird School of Global Management, which is the #1 international MBA program. We did MBA program in the world. And so they were talking about, okay, what does industry say that they want in managers and next generation of leaders, knowing that, technological change is happening at unprecedented rates, and also that, globalization is here to stay. I mean, yes, there are lots of talk about kind of isolationist and nationalistic policies, but the global trade we know is I think here to stay, and so we have this increasingly globalized world. What happens here is very easily transferred to any other country. So what are the types of leaders that you need? And they said, entrepreneurial skills, adaptable, creative, what else? Global mindset, ability to reach across borders, and these types of things. And a lot of those I remembered from our coursework in management theory and leadership theory in grad school. And so I thought, well, it's great to read about those things, but how do you actually get the skills? How do you actually, get further along and move the needle? And I think leadership is something that's earned, not learned. And you have to go out there and earn it. And when I thought back on it, it was like, these are all the things that I got so much more experience in when I lived abroad.
So living abroad is one thing. Is that adequate just to say you've lived in one other country? Like if I moved to Canada for a year, does that give me enough international experience to say that, hey, I can represent you as a lawmaker now in my community or my state for my nation?
Well, I've done a little bit of research on this, and I know that, so this is one of the things I was thinking about, because there are other types of, live abroad programs, like in college, study abroad and that sort of thing. And, sometimes you can do a sort of sabbatical and volunteerism for a month or things like that. But really the depth of how in depth you go with another culture. So like you've stayed in one culture for, a year, or, a few years, the more depth you have is more important than breadth. So if you went to 50 different countries, like that's great. And I'm sure you would have much more cultural understanding, but the other things like getting a better sense of who you are, getting those entrepreneurial skills, because Henish, I know you've lived abroad, right?
Yeah.
And you have to put yourself out there every single day in every task you do. Going to the grocery store, asking for directions, walking into a social event where,
you don't know anyone.
Speak the language, you don't know anybody, you don't know the social cues that to normally understand. And, both you and I are the types of people that we just spike up conversations with, strangers, but it's, you can't really do that. And you also, the things that you define yourself by externally, kind of your family and your church and your, work and job and all those things, when that's kind of stripped away because nobody knows or cares like about any of that about you, you have to really start thinking about, who am I? And then they challenge you. They challenge your worldview. They challenge your ideas, and all of that gives you a better sense of self, and that helps with your confidence, your ability to be a manager, all those things.
So can you think of anyone that you respect or appreciate that has some global experience that's now like an elected official for us, either in your state or nationally? Because a lot of these people do have experience, but it's different working for the State Department or being an ambassador than being boots on the ground working for a nonprofit or interacting, because just saying you've visited or have been a tourist in a bunch of countries isn't the same, like you said, as living someplace and having to adjust to different perspectives and ways of life, right? One of and as you mentioned, I lived abroad. I lived in India for a year as a professional, which was interesting because I'm ethnically from there, but I didn't have any connections or hookups in the area I had to move to, which was far away from my extended family. So just simple things were difficult. Like even turning on utility bills for the rental that I had, was a really hard challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you get to learn how to overcome all that things. So it teaches you a lot about yourself, but then you also learn about other people. Because one of the common things that people would tell me when I was staying in India, or when I come back to visit, it's like, oh, it's got to be tough to be in India because there's so many poor people. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But also keep in mind that if you lived like that for the last 1,000 years, and that's how your parents lived, and that's how your grandparents lived, maybe you don't consider yourself poor. Maybe that's the status quo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Right.
obviously isn't saying, yeah, would they appreciate better quality water, education, access to resources? Yeah, of course, everyone wants that. But at the same point, being poor and being rich is a relative term, right? And that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that you can learn from being abroad, especially if you're in Chile working with at-risk youth. I'm assuming a lot of them probably had lower income families and
Oh
households,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And I had the experience of being a I think I dyed my hair a little darker there when I was there because I wanted to blend in, but I did not blend in. And I was clearly kind of a foreigner and walking through really nice, not nice areas of town to get to work, because that's my work was at a community center, and in a struggling neighborhood. And so even just having that experience of kind of standing out, feeling like an outsider, not feeling like you fit in, and I think that's important too, right? Because I think that gets back at the emotional intelligence and empathy, because you know what it's like to be a stranger in a foreign land, and you know what it's like to have a viewpoint that's different from everybody else's.
Yep.
And I have to get, that's a really good question about leadership, and do I know any elected officials? I need to look into that. I feel like I saw at some point that maybe Kirsten Sinema, who's the senator for Arizona, might have. She's a big proponent of international exchange, I think, but I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. But
because it's different. It's different going for like official business, right? It's different when they put you up in the Marriott and then you're staying there and you have an agenda and you have to do meetings with your representatives from China or Taiwan or the Middle East or Africa, and that's definitely like an isolated one-off experience. So if you say, "Oh yeah, I've been to South Africa, so I know what Africa's like," that's not necessarily the case, right? So just traveling and visiting isn't the same as living and experiencing.
No,
but also,
it's so different.
I feel like kind of what you're getting at is just to have that variety of experience, right? If you just live a very stale, center of the line lifestyle and experience, then that's all you know. You can't appreciate, respect, and understand why someone might want to do something differently than you, right? Yeah. So it's having that breadth of experience, whether it's living in other countries, whether it's understanding what's important to people, why families are more important to some countries and cultures than profits and corporations and making the most money, right? And taking care of people, right? One of the things that shocks me today is that we're in the holidays and we continuously, for Americans, have to do food drives because people are hungry, right? Mm-hmm. Which is an incredible thing to think of, right? When you think of people that are hungry, you're like, okay, people in Africa are hungry, people in India are hungry, or people in these other poor countries are hungry. Well, how come we have so many hungry people in America, right? You don't hear of anyone starving to death, but there is malnutrition. When you look into it, school lunch programs provide a lot of kids with the only meal of the day. So when schools close, and that's why they have all these lunch programs that are handing out food now, because school's out of session and some families can't afford groceries for their kids. So if school's not open, those kids aren't eating. That's horrific in America. Yeah. Meanwhile, we can spend $600+ billion on missiles and tanks and aircraft carriers. But why can't we spend even $1 billion making sure that we have enough food for our people?
Yeah, I mean, preach, I agree. And I think one of the interesting things about me, and that I think if we did more of this professional exchange, it would be good to include service in it, because I think those were some of the first times I ever interacted on a day-to-day basis with poor people. I lived in a lifestyle where I went to Catholic school my whole upbringing. I lived in a complete bubble. Everyone I knew was pretty much, from that same ilk and background. And so sometimes it can all, people would ask me sometimes, well, why would you go help people in another country? We have a lot of people who you can help here. And I agree, but I think that when you force yourself outside your comfort zone like that, it makes you come back to your life with a whole new perspective and more passion for helping other people. I think. I mean, it did in my case.
Yeah, it's true. And so how do we get people out of their bubble? How do we get people to want to do this? Because I've thought the same thing with my kids. I've got a few kids now, and I've set up college funds for them. But I was like, if they don't go to college, I would be okay with that. Maybe they could use this to study abroad for a few years and have that as their college, because then they would learn a lot more than going to our local college. Because even though it's great to stay in San Diego, it won't give them that breadth of experience. So I really want them to do that. So I haven't traveled a lot with my kids internationally because they can't appreciate that as much as kids as
Yeah.
they could when they're 18 plus years old and have to figure things out on their own. So yeah, I'm gonna encourage that with my own family, and I always encourage that with anyone that I meet that's younger. I'm like, hey, if you have the opportunity, go places, do things, live there, interact, talk to strangers, meet the locals, see what's up, see what's ticking, and go with an attitude where you realize that being American isn't the best thing in the world, right?
Right.
Don't wear that on your sleeve, because that's one of the reasons why we get a bad reputation everywhere, is that we go around shouting that we're the best and everyone else stinks. Well, that's not exactly open-minded, and no one really wants to interact with that kind of person.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that my experience in Chile, and there's this term, enlightened nationalism, and I think that they say that people who study abroad have, and it's almost like you learn more about your country and you're more aware of how your country is placed in the world, but you kind of gain some pride in, in our case, being American. And I feel like that was definitely the case with me. I mean, I learned a lot of, so much of our U.S. foreign policy doesn't affect our U.S. foreign policy probably does not affect your everyday life unless you are selling to the military or something like that. But for people in other countries, it does. It can affect their everyday life. And when I lived in Chile, they had a dictatorship there for many years, and the U.S. government was involved in the overthrow of the communist government there, that then led to a dictatorship for quite I can't remember exactly how long, but there were a lot of people who died or were disappeared because of that. And so although people had positive views, I think, about the American people, they did not always have positive views about the American government and American foreign policy. And so I think even just to understand some of that, but then also I came back and I was like, wow, I'm really glad to live in the United States as a woman, because I get so many opportunities here. I can really, I could be a career woman my whole life and not have kids. Nobody would bat an eye, nobody would say you're doing it wrong. There's so many things that we take for granted, in the United States, that, just our safety, all the variety we have in foods and all kinds of things. And so I think you also really appreciate and you realize that there's a lot of great things, with your country of origin as well. And I wanted to touch on, because I also do think that, and I need to look into this more, but I think that the more different of a culture you go to, the more learning and transformation, you would have. To your point, the Canada question you had earlier, I think the more you because you've got to challenge yourself more, the more different the culture is, right?
Yeah, that's all true, and you're right. When you live in another country and you read the newspapers and stuff, that's kind of indicative. Like, man, this wasn't the same news that I was presented when I was in the U.S. This is a completely different side of the story that's being reported by these foreign media agencies. So that's always interesting to see too, because it can be impactful, right? I mean, when the U.S. gets involved in other people's governments, for what we think is good, getting rid of communism, which we've been against for so long, but then it gets replaced with something worse. Did that really help out? And ideally, there's people on the ground, right? There's intelligence officers and stuff that have inserted themselves and are giving that information back to the people back in the U.S. to make these decisions. Ultimately, it always comes down to money somehow, right? I mean, it's never like, oh yeah, we need to spread democracy and freedom. It's rarely the case. It's probably because they have oil or Chihuahua fur that we need, and that's necessary for our commerce, right? I mean, that's probably what it is. No one likes to say it, and I put you on the spot, but every time that's the case.
Yeah, it does seem. My boyfriend always says follow the money, and yeah, I think especially in politics, or in anything in life, it tends to be what kind of runs the show. You're running an organization, whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, in Chile, even today, they're trying to do constitutional reforms, because even though they've been they went from dictatorship to democracy. I think in the early 90s was when they voted Pinochet out, but they have these remnants of that he baked into the Constitution, that force sort of private sector involvement in social parts of life. So they've tried to kind of reform education, reform these other aspects of their government, but they haven't been able to because of the Constitution that was created by this dictator.
So traveling can be expensive if you don't have the flexibility to do so, but there's lots of opportunities for this, right? You can go for like a tourist type thing. You can do like volunteer stuff, but that still gets pricey, right? You're still spending a few $1,000s to spend X amount of weeks there. So what's happened recently with our family is that for the last almost year and a half now, we've been using foreign au pairs, right? Which is a fancy word for babysitter from another country. That lives with us as an exchange program, and it's sponsored by the State Department, which works out great. So we take on a young person that lives with us from another country. So initially we had a young lady from Italy that lived with us for a year, and now for the last 2-3 months we've had a young lady from Brazil that's living with us that takes care of our kids, and we give her room and board, and she stays in one of our bedrooms, and for X number of hours a week she watches our kids and is part of our family, and for all of her spare time she can do whatever she wants, meet new friends, go out and explore America. And it's been great, and that same kind of opportunity exists here for Americans to go to other countries and do something similar. You're not going to get rich off it, but at least it won't cost you thousands of dollars because they'll pay for you to live and stay with someone, and then they give you enough money to have a little bit of spending cash. So that's a good option.
No, I think that's amazing. And there's also there's also research that shows that if you have deep relationships with people from other countries, that it improves creativity, and they kind of did a study of people who were like friends with international students and in college or something, and then people who had significant others who were international students, and those who had significant others and had more deep relationships with people from other countries, they were shown to be more creative. So I think that it's totally, I agree that there are opportunities, even if you stay here, in the United States, there's opportunities to gain some of that, cultural awareness and challenge and all that. But I think in the same way that you said, U.S. State Department supports that type of program because it helps bring America to the world and bring positive views of America to the world. I think it would be great if they supported something that, and companies kind of contributed to it, and local governments contributed to it, and federal government contributed, and everybody gets better leaders who are able to come up with some of the ideas and the businesses and the policies that we need in the future. Because especially with this last election, I think, to me, it seems more obvious than ever that the old way of doing things and the old sort of political rhetoric is just not going to work anymore. People are really frustrated, and that's another thing. And I could go on this forever, but I think that this would help more international engagement, would help with how polarized we are with our neighbors, because the more you, again, are outside of your comfort zone, it makes you, when you come back to your life, it makes you just be more aware and more kind of curious of other viewpoints. And we need that, not just for having people who are global minded, but also people who can get along with their neighbor.
Yeah, it's important, and that's one of the main purposes of this show, is to spread awareness and create awareness and get people thinking about stuff they might not think about, right? And so we're talking about that, right? We're saying not just go visit, don't just go to Greece to go visit, but if you can, get involved, even if it's just for a week or two, and try to interact with some locals with a volunteer program or a cultural exchange, which is super effective. Additionally, there's another huge benefit that we haven't touched on, which is that we're also increasing the awareness and perception of Americans, right? I remember years ago, I spent some time living in the Netherlands, and I met a woman who was running exchange programs for Russian students there. And so she asked, and I was there with my brother, she asked if we would host a Q&A with a bunch of Russian students that had questions about Americans, right? Because they didn't know, and all they know is from what they see from media. And it was
Yeah.
awesome
So
and
what did they
hilarious
ask?
at the same time, because they're meeting us, and I was like, cool, let's just jump into it. What are your stereotypes of Americans? What do you know about us? What kind of questions do you have? And they're like, well, in America, is everyone fat? And I'm like, well, geez, it's kind of, is everyone racist? Do they have school shootings all the time? Everyone has a gun.
Yeah.
They had all these questions. I was like, man, I
Mhm.
guess I can see why you would think that, right?
Mhm.
Is everyone closed-minded? And so I just had to kind of say, hey, fortunately in America, everyone's an individual and they can choose who they want to be and how they are and what they believe, and
Yeah.
they're allowed that right. So is everyone racist? Probably not. Does it exist? Yeah. Is everyone overweight? No. But does it exist? Yeah. Like, do school shootings happen way too much? 100%. And
Mhm.
I don't know what the numbers have been during COVID because the schools have been shut. But prior to that, it was pretty much once a day. Every day there was a school shooting somewhere in the United States, which when you
Yeah.
see that internationally, that's a lot, because there's entire
Well,
countries that go years with never having school shootings, partially because they don't have guns in most places. But
yeah,
secondly,
and I mean, I remember we had, when I was working at the city of Phoenix, we had there's these Mandela Washington Fellows, and it's also a program by the State Department, and they bring, the kind of best and brightest from Africa in a variety of different fields, and then they have them do education and then professional development, and like internships. And so we had an intern in the city of Phoenix Water Department, and I think she was from Senegal. We multiple years we had them as they're doing their internships there. And I remember one of them said that she came over to the U.S. with another fellow from Africa, and as they were like about to land, the person she was with started to have an anxiety attack because she was so afraid she was gonna like get shot. And so I think most Americans would never think that someone from Africa would be afraid to come to the United States, but it's just interesting. I'm not saying whether her fear was right or wrong, but at least you recognize that that there are different viewpoints of how we live.
well, then it's the perceptions of the media that you've consumed, right? Whether you choose to, or that's what's presented to you, or that's the propaganda that you've been given. It's hard to make that decision, right? And smart people that are kind of thinking constructively, right, don't just take information presented to them as unfiltered truth.
Yes.
They know that they might have to consider it from different angles, right? Is there another
Yes.
perspective? Is there another angle? Is there another angle to the truth, right? Is there
Mm-hmm.
another viewpoint that has a different truth to this? Because
Yes.
that's what I always see and think of, and I think that's some of our experience of traveling internationally, saying, hey, if I think this is wrong, well, someone thinks it's right, and so I'm always doing that exercise in my head. Why would someone want it this way, right?
Yes.
And
Yes, and
so,
I think that's exactly like when you have some of those awarenesses, it makes you a better consumer of information. It makes you, a better analyst. And anything where you have to be considering, kind of multiple viewpoints, which we really need more of, because, especially with social media. And it's funny because, when the internet first came out, and, you think, oh, it's going, people are going to be so much better informed, and people are going to be, more connected to people from around the world, and it's going to broaden their tribe, and it seems like, unfortunately, it's just made it so that we're more and more and more in our little bubbles,
well, yeah,
and
they create these algorithms to kind of isolate you and let you go down your rabbit hole of whatever you think you might be ingesting, right? You think the world is
exactly,
flat? Good news. Here's 5 more articles proving the world is flat. We've got
yeah,
it. We've got it. The science are lying, right? It's true. The
yeah,
truth is that it's flat, and then all you'll get is that information. So yeah,
exactly,
it's not allowing you to constructively, think about this and figure out what the actual truth is, or what you believe to be the truth, right? Because this is
yeah.
still one of those things where faith and belief seem to coincide with the information that's presented to us.
Yeah, and this is like one of those things. This is one of these problems that I think we need, new types of leaders to deal with, is the whole social media landscape and fake news and all that stuff, all this that's happening, that it's like the technology has made it so that like it's so far ahead of where the public policy is, and that, I mean, we're not even playing catch up. We're just like slowly walking and saying to ourselves, this seems bad, but it's like we're expecting the technology companies to solve it all themselves, and and they're still in my view, they're kind of still catching up to it.
No,
So
it's like we discussed earlier. They're not doing this as like a social justice or an equality play. They're doing this
right.
to make money. They're trying to
Yeah.
figure out how they can get advertisers, how they can sell stuff, how they can get you on a subscription, how they can get you to upgrade something, right? And so it always comes down to how can you spend money and how are they going to benefit, not necessarily what's the best truth out there for the planet,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, they've done a lot of good. It's like even in a lot of developing countries, everybody has a cell phone, and I mean, there's a lot of good to be said about all the technological advances and everything, but it's we need to have smart people thinking about how do we deal with, like any technological change, there's always unintended consequences, and how do you deal with those? So yeah.
So we can kind of wrap this up. We still haven't really solved the problem how to get people to leave their country and travel a little bit, right? Because there's
Well,
still like
I think that
50% of Americans that don't have a passport.
oh yeah, that's true. I think we need companies to step up. First, we need some companies to step up and say, I want to develop leaders within my company, and I want my employees to get exposed to to people from other countries and get some of their ideas, and even hey, if I want to sell more in Africa, it might be beneficial for me to have someone from Africa take some stock in what we're doing in developing our product or service. So I think we need companies to step up and local governments to step up, and say that, hey, we want citizens who are more able to and more excited about being involved in their community in a constructive and good way, and in a global way.
We
And
saw
so
that we saw that a little bit of that at Syracuse, right? When we were there for our executive masters in public administration, we had, I think, 30+% of our cohorts from other countries, right?
oh
From
yeah,
places as ranging as Mongolia to Moldova, right? It was really pretty
yeah,
incredible to now, I still message some of the people that I met from Mongolia. It's like, okay, now he was like now that dude that I know over there is that we went to school with is now director of like youth recreation of Mongolia. I was like, well, that's an interesting position, like I don't have to
yeah.
playing, keep away with the goat head type thing that I've seen on Discovery Channel, but it's 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 cool. It's cool. It's cool to see that these people that we got to meet these people from Korea, from South
Yeah.
America, from all over Europe and stuff like that. So those governments are doing it. I would assume that we'd want to do the same thing with some of our public servants. Is like, okay, cool. You
Yeah.
get to do a year study in China or in
Yeah.
in Bangladesh or something like that. Get over there and
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. And I chose Syracuse in large part. A, it was the #1 program for public administration, but B, because of all the international students. I mean, they have a way more than other kind of comparative schools. So yeah, I think we need more of those opportunities. And oh, I was going to say something else about the last part. I forgot now, but yeah, we need more of these opportunities, and anything I could do to help, I would love to.
Well, so the awareness is the first thing, right? To get people to think, okay, cool, it would be cool to go spend some time someplace else that's not America, that's different, so I can get a different perspective because you haven't seen enough of the world. But then
Oh, I remembered. Sorry, I remembered
what?
what I was going to say, which is I think the key is that we need to make it about leadership, because not everybody wants to live in another country, but maybe it's just because they don't understand how much your leadership can develop by doing that, or how you could become a part of a prestigious program that could help you in the future with your job. So I think there's already a lot of stuff out there for people who are already global minded, already care about the world, but we need to make something like this about leadership so that it can attract a broader net, or we can broaden the net.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, understanding people, leadership is about people. And so if you don't understand people from everywhere, then you're not going to be as good of a leader as you could be.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Awesome. Carmen, thank you for spending some time with me. Thanks again to Manscaped for there's continued sponsorship and there's their swag and stuff, and keeping men's pieces well groomed. It's probably an international type thing. I'm assuming that that's a whole different episode of what people's grooming habits are international.
That is a different.
We're not-
Also eye-opening.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, if you guys like the show, please like, comment, and subscribe. And you can always use the Manscaped code at I've Got a Theory to get some discounts and stuff like that. So thank you, Carmen, for joining me and sharing your theory about traveling and being international to get some leadership positions.
Yeah, thank you, Henish. You always make me laugh, and I'm so excited that you're doing this and making people think. We need more of that. So Good job.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Bye.